this event. Guys, thanks very, very much.
Good.
Now, my intention in this campaign is to do what a lot of people who run for office don't do. And that is to speak about the real issues impacting working people throughout New Hampshire, Vermont, and America. But before I begin, and I want to get into those issues, let me give you some very interesting and good news. As some of you may know, I have been thinking a lot about running for president, and the reasons are obvious. But one of the hesitations I had is, for a start, could we garner the kind of grassroots support that Elizabeth is talking about? Is there a willingness in this country for middle class and working class people to say enough is enough? This country belongs to all of us and not a handful of billionaires. And that was the question that was in my mind. And you know, it's a fair question. There's a lot of anger out there, but can we mobilize people? I am happy to tell you that on the first day of our campaign, first day, 24 hours, 100,000 people all over this country signed up to get on board. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. And I'm also happy. The other reservation that I had was, look, and I'm going to talk about this at some length. We live in a corrupt campaign finance system where apparently the only people who can run for office and think they can win are people who are either very, very wealthy themselves or dependent on millionaires and billionaires. That's the fact. And this is not about Bernie Sanders. This is about any of you, any person in America who says, you know, I'd like to run for the Senate. I'd like to run for governor. I'd like to run for president, but I'm not a wealthy person. You know, I have good ideas. I believe in public service, but I don't want to become dependent on billionaires. Can, in this day and age, an ordinary person not dependent upon billionaires actually raise the funds that he or she needs to run a strong campaign? I am happy to tell you, now listen to this, that in the first 24 hours of our campaign, we have raised $1.5 million. Yeah. And here's how we did it. We did it with 35,000 people contributing, an average of $43. Yeah. How's that? So I know and you know that we will be heavily outspent. The billionaires have it all. They can spend as much money as they want. But the question to me is not whether we can raise as much money as our opponents. We can't. The question was whether we can raise enough money to run a strong, credible, and winning campaign. And based on this first day, I believe that we can. Let me just say a few words as to why I, in fact, am running. And I am running because this country today faces more serious crises than at any time since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Let me tell you what I mean by that. And if you throw in, by the way, the planetary crisis of climate change, it may well be that this particular moment in American history is the more severe, with more problems than we have seen in the modern history of our country. Now, what do I mean by that? What are some of the issues that are out there? I want you all to be thinking about this, because these are the issues that I'll be raising during the campaign. You are looking at a candidate who was elected to the U.S. House in Vermont 8 times and the Senate twice. I've never run a negative political ad. Because I don't believe that the function of politics is to be beating up and disparaging your opponents or getting involved in political gossip. What I believe and what has worked in Vermont and what I believe can work all over this country is talking about the issues that the American people want to hear discussed. And I think So let me just talk about them. And at the top of the list, there is a very simple question that millions of people are asking themselves. And this is the question. The question is that today, this country at this moment is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And today, we are wealthier than any other time in our history. Today, we have seen in the last 30, 40 years an explosion of technology, right? Every worker in this room is producing more than somebody who had your job 30, 40 years ago. Technology is exploding, productivity is exploding. So all over America, people are asking, how does it happen if this is the wealthiest country in the history of the world? If I am a more productive worker than I used to be, how does it happen that I am working longer hours for lower wages? How does it happen that what I am earning today is less than it was 30 or 40 years ago in inflation accounted for wages? How does it happen that I have almost no money in the bank for me to retire with dignity? How does it happen that I can't afford childcare for my kids? How does it happen that my kids either can't afford to go to college or will leave college deeply in debt? How does it happen in the richest country in the history of the world? And the answer to that question is pretty obvious to a growing number of Americans. And that is, yes, we are the richest country in the history of the world, but we have a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality in which the billionaire class is getting it all. And the American people are saying, and what this campaign is about, is enough is enough. They can't get it all. You know, it's like if we sat down to dinner, 10 people sit at a table and have dinner, one guy eats it all. There's plenty of food, but one guy gets it all. That is not what this economy is supposed to be about. That is morally unacceptable. We cannot be seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires at the same time as people work longer hours for lower wages, and we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. That is not sustainable, that is not moral, and that is not what the American economy is supposed to be about. And you and I are going to change that in a very profound way. Now, I've been in this campaign for all of 2 days. And as you can see, I have a definitive white paper here, scratched out at the diner. But let me touch on clearly some of the issues that we are going to be focusing on and some of the solutions we're going to bring forward. For a start, when people are asked what the major issue impacting them is, what they always say on poll after poll is jobs and the economy. That's what they say, and they're right. Today, real unemployment is not 5.5%. Real unemployment, including those people who have given up looking for work, and even more significantly, those people who are working part-time who want to work full-time. You know, people working part-time when they want to work full-time? Got millions of them. Real unemployment is 11%. What we have got to do as a nation is create millions of decent paying jobs. The fastest way that I know how to do that is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Our roads, our bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, rail, levees, dams. I have introduced legislation which would spend $1 trillion in the next 5 years. It would create and maintain 13 million decent paying jobs. That's what we've got to do. And when we talk about jobs, what we want to see is corporate America and the big money interests investing in New Hampshire and in Vermont and in America, and not simply in low-wage countries all over the world. And that is why I have opposed every major trade agreement, NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and why I will help lead the opposition against the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement. But it is not just jobs. It is jobs that pay people a living wage. And you can know everything you need to know about the American economy by understanding this. 30 years ago, the largest private sector employer in the United States of America was General Motors. Manufactured cars, paid workers a good wage, good benefits, strong union. Today, the largest private sector employer in America is Walmart. Low wages, terrible benefits, vehemently anti-union. So what we have got to do is, once again, create an economy which has full-time, decent paying jobs. For a start, what we have got to do is raise the federal minimum wage from a starvation wage of $7.25 to a living wage. And that means over the next several years up to $15 an hour. We need pay equity for women workers. It is not acceptable that women make 78 cents on the dollar doing the same work as men. And when you just do that, equal pay for equal work, you will take a significant bite out of poverty in America, because we have many, many women who are heading up their families earning unfair and inadequate wages. And let me tell you about something else that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but is enormously important. And that is changing the Fair Labor Standards Act. What do I mean by that? Doesn't sound too sexy, but it is. There was a time when a working person would work for 45, 50 hours a week and automatically get time and a half. That's a big deal. But as a result of not updating the Fair Labor Standards Act, you can have people working in McDonald's here in Manchester, working 50 or 60 hours a week, making $25,000, $27,000 a year, and guess what? They don't get time and a half. So we're going to raise that threshold from $23,000, which hasn't been changed in years, up to $55,000. That will provide overtime for millions and millions of workers who deserve it. Let me touch on another issue that I know is of great concern to people in New Hampshire and all over this country. And this is a huge, huge issue. And this issue speaks to the fact that this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United is literally undermining the foundations of American democracy. Now, in Vermont and in New Hampshire, many states in New England, we have old-fashioned town meetings. And people come out and they argue about the school budget and they argue about the roads budget and their salaries they pay their workers, and they vote. And each person has one vote. That's really what democracy is about. That's New England democracy. One person, one vote. But all of you know that as a result of Citizens United and other terrible Supreme Court decisions, we are at a moment where billionaires like the Koch brothers and others are now able to purchase the candidates that they want. Now, I know that New Hampshire thinks that the first primary in the country takes place here in New Hampshire. You're wrong. We have already held the Sheldon Adelson primary. And here's a primary where he sits there. He's worth many billions of dollars. And Republicans from all over, they come and they say, Sheldon, what do you want us to do for you? And if we do it, will you give us hundreds of millions of dollars? Well, brothers and sisters, that is not the kind of democracy that I believe in. We are not going to allow Sheldon Adelson, we're not going to allow the Koch brothers, we're not going to allow other billionaires to continue spending hundreds of millions of Americans to elect the candidates they want. We need a campaign finance system that allows ordinary Americans to elect the candidates they want. That's why, in my view, we have got to be as aggressive as we can in overturning, through a constitutional amendment, this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. We've got to move toward disclosure, which means if the Koch brothers want to put ugly 30-second ads on TV, they're going to have their pretty faces on those ads so the American people know who's putting them on. And in my view, you're getting a major response from outside. All right. And in my view, we need to move toward public funding of elections so everybody has a fair shot at getting an election. Often, people will ask me, they'll say, well, Bernie, what is the major issue? And it's hard to come up with a major issue because there are so many serious issues that are out there. But clearly, one issue that has to be in the forefront of everything that we talk about is the planetary crisis of climate change. It cannot be ignored. All right. They're hearing it before you are. All right. And here's the story. And by the way, here is how this enormously important issue relates to campaign finance. All right, let me tell you exactly how it does as a member of the U.S. Senate. I sit on both. I'm the only person in the minority who sits on both the Energy Committee and the Environmental Committee, and I'm very proud of that. And in that capacity, we have heard from scientists, not only in the United States, from all over the world, and this is what they tell us. They say climate change obviously is real. Climate change is caused by carbon emission and human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in this country and around the world. And if we do not get our act together in the next few years, it is likely, and I want you to think about what this means, it is likely that the planet Earth will be between 5 degrees and 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by the end of this century. And just think what that means in terms of drought and flooding and extreme weather disturbances and all of the other problems associated with that, acidification of the ocean, etc. Now, I believe that the United States can and must lead the world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, and do everything that we can to combat climate change. Yeah. That's my view. And by the way, we know how to do that, and the technology is only getting better and better. In Vermont, we have brought in a lot of money in our state for weatherization. There are homes in Vermont that have cut their fuel consumption and their carbon emissions by 50% or more. People saving money, living in more comfortable homes, emitting less carbon. We should be doing this all over America. We should be expanding and radically improving rail transportation in America. It is crazy that we're still driving cars to get 20, 25 miles an hour. We could do much better than that. Bottom line, though, is we have a moral imperative in terms of the kind of planet we're leaving our kids and our grandchildren to do everything that we can, not only as a nation, but to lead the world in combating climate change. And I believe that very strongly. And I was the first member, along with Senator Barbara Boxer of California, to introduce legislation imposing a carbon tax on those people who are polluting our environment. In Vermont and all over this country, wherever I go, and I see young people, the question that is on their mind is how they can afford to go to college and not leave school deeply in debt. And this is not only a very, very important issue for the middle class and working class of this country, because as everybody knows, it is harder and harder to make it into the middle class if you don't have a college degree, or at least post-high school education. But it is also a question for our entire economy, in the sense of how do we compete effectively in the global economy if we don't have the best educated workforce? 30 years ago, the United States led the world in terms of the percentage of our people who had a college degree. Unbelievably, today we are in 12th place. We're in 12th place. And for hundreds of thousands of working class young people, who are bright, who want to go to college, they're looking at there and saying, you know what? I don't want to leave school $50,000, $100,000 in debt. I'm not going to go to college. So this is a loss to those individuals, but it is a loss to our entire economy. Now, what do other countries around the world do? Does anybody here know what tuition is in Germany? Zero. Well, if tuition in Germany is zero for their public colleges and universities, I think tuition in this country should be zero for public colleges and universities. Now, it will cost us to do that. Is an expensive proposition. It really is. We're going to introduce legislation within the next couple of weeks. We're trying to work out all of the details on it. But we think it's going to cost about $70 billion a year to make tuition free in public colleges and universities in the United States of America. A lot of money, $70 billion. But you know what? It is less money than we lose every year by corporate tax evasion. We lose $100 billion every year because profitable corporations stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, avoiding U.S. taxes, and in some cases paying zero in U.S. taxes. So I think what we need to do is end this corporate tax evasion and put that money into higher education so that every person in this country can get a college education regardless of their income. Some of you may know, many Americans don't, but some of you may know that the United States of America remains the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. We're the only country. Now, countries around the world have different systems. We live near Canada. They have their system. The UK has a different system. Denmark has a different system. Germany has a different system, etc. All different. But all of them have several common denominators. Number one, health care is a right of all of their people, and private insurance companies do not play a significant role. In my view, this country must move toward a national health care system, a Medicare for all single-payer program. Last point that I want to make. I am the ranking member of the Budget Committee in the Senate. That means I'm kind of leader of the opposition. Republicans are in the majority. Republicans have brought forth a budget which is so bad. This is true. One of the problems we have, if I told you what was in the budget, you'd say, well, Bernie, you're being partisan. You're really overstating it. It really is not that bad. It really is that bad. It really is that bad. And what Republicans want to do right now in their budget is unbelievable. The media doesn't kind of pick up on this. It's not a sexy enough issue. That's another story. The Republicans in their budget want to eliminate the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Now, in my view, I voted for the Affordable Care Act. It has done some good things, important things, doesn't go far enough. I voted for it.
If you eliminate the Affordable Care Act, you are throwing 16 million people off of health insurance. On top of that, the Republicans have cut Medicaid by over $400 billion in their budget. This would throw another 11 million Americans simply off of health insurance. 16 plus 11 is 27 million people thrown off of health insurance. And when you ask the Republicans, as I have, what happens? The 27 million people who lose their health insurance, where do they go? How many will die? How many will end up much sicker than they have to be? Republicans have no response at all. And they think they can get away with it because by and large the media doesn't cover it. But my view is that when you have a budget that throws 27 million Americans off of health insurance, when you have a budget in a nation where millions of people are struggling to put food on the table, and they cut huge amounts of money from nutrition programs, food stamps, the WIC program, and other basic nutrition programs. When they, at a time when we're trying to make it easier for kids to go to college, cut $90 billion in Pell Grants over a 10-year period. And then on top of all of that, what the Republican budget does, this is true. You don't believe me? It is true. What they do is give a huge tax break to the 6,000 wealthiest families in America by repealing the estate tax. $269 billion in tax breaks for the top 0.2% of Americans, and then they raise taxes on working families and lower income inequality. The Republican response, tax breaks for billionaires, raising taxes on working families. It is hard to describe, it really is, what world these people are living in. But the world that they are living in is not your world. It is not the world of the middle class or working families. It is a world of the Koch brothers, of Sheldon Adelson, of other billionaires who have pushed this agenda for years. Now, as part of the overall agenda, not in this budget, Republicans for years and this year are talking about cuts in Social Security. Cuts in Social Security, raising the retirement age to 70, or playing around with the COLAs, lowering the COLAs that people receive. So let me be very clear. When you have millions of seniors in this country, when you have millions of veterans in this country, you do not cut Social Security when older people are struggling. You know what you do? You increase Social Security kids, because people who put their lives on the line to defend us have got to get the best health care possible. And we're going to work on that. So let me conclude, and thank you all so much for being here. Let me conclude by saying this. In the last 25, 30 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth in this country. You know, the Republicans very often talk about their fear and their hatred of wealth distribution. They think it's a terrible idea. Well, the truth is that for the last 30 years, there has been a massive distribution of wealth in this country. It has gone from working families and the middle class to the top 0.1%. I'm talking about many trillions of dollars. That pie, that slice of the pie that the middle class used to get has significantly less, and that wealth has gone to the top 0.1%. So I think it's time to redistribute it the other way, and maybe give the middle class a fair shot. Let me conclude by thanking you all for coming out. And let me just say this. This campaign that we are going to wage in New Hampshire and all over the country is a very different type of campaign that others run. I know that some people out there say, well, you know, Bernie is this, Bernie is that, but he really can't win. You know what? We really can win. You know, the polling, I'm not much into polls, and polls go up and polls go down, but the last poll that I saw here in New Hampshire had us at 19%, and half the people in this state don't know who I am. So I think we've got a real shot at this, but the only way we win it, it's not going to be that we're going to put more we're going to have TV ads, not as much as our opponents. The only way we win this thing is by a strong grassroots, door-to-door campaign. That's what I believe in. That's what I've always done in Vermont. In our last campaign in Vermont, you know how much money we spent on TV ads? Zero, not a nickel. We put it all into grassroots organizing. So we are gonna do a lot of door knocking, and you are the guys who are gonna do it. So I think we can win here. I seriously believe we have a path to victory. It's hard. We're the underdogs. I admit that. But with your help, we can win. And it is time, really, in a very fundamental way, to return our country and our government to all of the people and not to a handful of billionaires. And with your help, that is what we're going to do. Thank you all very, very much.